Fab. Felly, noswaith dda i chi gyd a diolch am ymuno â ni ar gyfer digwyddiad ymgyrch Dweud y Ddweud Llywodraeth Cymru mewn partneriaeth gyda'r Politics Project, lle bydd dylanwadwyr y cyfryngau cymdeithasol yn cael cyfle i ofyn i banel o gynghorwyr lleol am y materion sy'n bwysig iddyn nhw. So thank you all for joining us this evening for the Welsh Government's Use Your Views campaign event in partnership with the Politics Project, where 4 young social media influencers will have the chance to ask questions to a panel of local councillors from across Wales about the issues which are most important to them. Felly Gwen Davies ydw i a fi fydd yn cadeirio y sesiwn. I'm Gwen Davies and I'll be chairing the session this evening. Mae etholiadau lleol yn digwydd ar y 5 o Fai ac mae mwy o bobl nag erioed yn gallu pleidleisio yng Nghymru, gyda phobl ifanc 11 oed neu'n hŷn yn gallu dweud eu dweud. Nod y sesiwn hon yw codi ymwybyddiaeth o'r materion y mae llywodraethau'n ymdrin â nhw ar lefel leol ac yn amlygu sut y gall pobl ifanc defnyddio eu barn i wneud newid cadarnhaol yng Nghymru. Byddem yn clywed am nifer o bynciau diddorol sy'n procio'r meddwl dros yr awr a hanner nesaf wrth i'n dylanwadwyr gynnig cwestiynau i'r panel. So local elections are taking place on May the 5th this year, and more people than ever can now vote in Wales, with young people aged 16 and over now able to have their say. This session aims to raise awareness of the issues governments deal with at a local level and highlight how young people can use their views and make a positive change in Wales. So we'll be hearing about some of the interesting and thought-provoking topics over the next hour and a half as our influencers put their questions to the panel. And on that note, I'd like to introduce you to our panel of local councillors who will be taking questions this evening. So first of all, we have Rhys Taylor, who is a Liberal Democrat councillor from Cardiff. We also have then Denisha Patel, who is a Labour councillor from Bridgend. Nia Wen Jeffries, who is a Plaid Cymru councillor from Gwynedd, and Ross Pennell Thomas, who is an independent councillor also from Bridgend. Fab. So I think before we move on to our questions from our influencers, we just have a few questions to start off for the panel about what it's like to be a local councillor. So I think we'll start with you, Rhys. So what does a typical week look like as a local councillor?
Well, I'm not sure about anybody else, but there's no one week the same. I mean, you know, a lot of people think you deal with potholes and bins, and there are potholes and bins every week. But there's always something keeping you on your toes, whether that's council business, whether it's, you know, somebody needing help with housing or council tax. But generally, it's lots of getting to meet people and to hear from people. And being really bedded in and involved with your community. So there's no one week is the same. There's a lot of patterns, but I would say that it does change from week to week and does keep you on your toes.
That's a good answer, I think. So the next question then is for you, Denisha. So why did you decide to go into local government?
Curiosity, I think, is probably the main driver behind why I decided to stand. I was curious as to what the role involved. I'd been active in university and student politics, but hadn't really made that step into bringing that into the real world. So yeah, I was curious as to what it would be about, and I also really wanted to feel part of my community. So I moved away to go to university, and then I came back, and it was a bit of a time where you kind of feel a little bit unsettled. So I wanted to make more links in my community, and I thought that I had something to offer. And I think everyone has something to offer, and therefore I put myself forward. You know, it's not a foregone conclusion that you'll win, but I thought I'll be an option, and and that's basically why I stood.
That's great, thank you. So the next question is for you, Nia. So as a local councillor, what sort of things do you work on?
Ie, dwi'n meddwl mae o'n cymysgedd fel oedd Rhys yn deud. bob math o bethau o baw cwn, potholes, mlaen i materion mwy pwysig i wneud efo treth cyngor a pethau fel yna. Mae o'n amrywiol iawn i ddeud y gwir, ond mae'n gyfle i wneud gwahaniaeth i fywyd pobl bob dydd, dwi'n meddwl. Yeah, very similar to what Rhys said, really, the usual things that we all expect, potholes, dog mess, seagulls is a big problem here in the summer. But also, more serious things, help with benefits, housing. But there is a real chance to make a difference and to help people every day, really. So it's rewarding.
Definitely. And the last question then, before we move on to our influencers questions, is for you, Ross. What has been your highlight what's been the highlight of your work as a local councillor so far, do you think?
Felly, diolch am y gwahoddiad. Thanks so much for the invitation to be here today. I've been a community councillor for the best part of 15 years, county borough member for 10 years. So I think without wanting to highlight particular pieces of work, it's always good when you have a big win against big developers or big corporates, as I like to know. Residents like to know that they have a fighting chance against big corporates if there are issues in your local community. I'm pretty sure other councillors will agree that often people contact us when they are at the end of their tether. At the end, the wit's end on issues that they've possibly contacted the council on. So it's those little wins that make the biggest difference to people's lives. Local government is the closest part of our structure to the people in their own communities and in their own homes. So if you are able to get those quick wins for people where they live, that really matters. It's a thankless task, broadly speaking. But when people do thank you for the wins that you have helped them to achieve, it does make the biggest of differences.
Yeah, I'm sure you're all in agreement then. It's a very rewarding job as a local councillor. Great, thank you. So I think we have warmed up a bit now, so I think we can move on to some of the questions from our influencers. And Ian, perhaps if we could just keep Heledd on to ask her questions, and then we'll bring the other influencers in then when it's their turn. So I think they'll disappear in a minute. There we go. So just to introduce you to Heledd Roberts. So Heledd is from Carmarthenshire, and she is also a mental health campaigner, and she's open about her struggles with her own mental health. So Heledd has a few questions for the panel. So Heledd, if you'd like to ask your first question.
Yeah, first of all, I just wanted to say a huge thank you for you all for sharing your time with us this evening. So my first question is, with everything that's happening now around women's safety due to a number of gender-related killings, what can local government do to make sure that women are safe whilst living their daily lives, and especially on a community level?
Diolch, Heledd. So I think maybe we'll take that to you, Danisha, first.
Yeah, so I think local government has an important role to play in this. It's not just a policing matter. With local government, we obviously work in conjunction with the police, but we in Bridgend, we run the CCTV. So I think a lot of women would feel safer if they knew there was CCTV covering kind of the quiet spots. I also know that we run initiatives with different stakeholders in the community. We've got Ask and Answer, I think, or Ask Ann. There's they've got so it's kind of question and answers that people it's like a piece of kit that people can answer, ask questions to, and they get the answers to. We've got schemes with local pubs where you have safe havens. So if you're out in the night, we do work with a lot of people, I think is basically what I'm saying. And I think that, I think women's safety is important, and highlighting the issue and getting people to talk about it and recognising it as an issue is one of the key roles that we play as local councillors and in local government.
Great. Thank you. Does anyone else have anything to add, or we can move on to the next question? So Ross, yeah.
Yeah, just very quickly on that. One thing local government shouldn't do is to victim blame, because I think we've seen that happen on too many occasions. It is not the fault of women. And I remember an instance on Twitter with the Police and Crime Commissioner, I think in the Yorkshire area, which was absolutely horrific. So we mustn't victim blame. And I think there's a key part to be played here by our education sector, teaching boys relationship education in schools. I think that's absolutely vitally important. So our education sector has a huge role to play in this, about how to properly behave, and just that women's safety is absolutely vital. Thanks, Gwen.
Fab. Thank you both for their answers. Helen, do you want to move on to your next question?
Yeah, lovely, diolch. Mental health is a huge priority of mine, and I'm sure it is great importance to many young people in your, I can't say this word, constituency. Yeah. However, I personally feel that the waiting time to see a counsellor or a therapist or any mental health support specialist is unacceptable. What steps can counsellors take to help people with mental health conditions and concerns receive timely treatment and follow-up care?
Thank you. I think I'll take that to Nia first.
Diolch Heledd, a diolch I chdi am amlygu y pwnc mor bwysig yma. Dwi'n meddwl, ta fel da ni'n deud yn Gymraeg, dechrau wrth yn traed, a da ni'n neud hynna lot yn Cyngor Gwynedd efo cefnogi iechyd meddwl staff y cyngor I ddechrau cychwyn. Mae 6,000 o bobl yn Wynedd yn gweithio i'r cyngor, a mae wedi bod yn andros o amser anodd iddyn nhw yn ystod y pandemig yn enwedig, ond hyd yn oed cyn hynna, so mae gennym ni lot yn y cyngor I gefnogi staff yn hunan, gwasanaeth cwnsela ac yn y blaen, a da ni'n neud lot o gweithdai efo amdrwcanna amdan neu siŵr bod pobl yn cymryd digon o frecs o'i gwaith ac yn y blaen. Ond dwi'n meddwl yn ehangach na hynna, mae yna rôl I ni fel cynghorwyr I hyrwyddo y pwnc yma ac I gydweithio'n agos hefo'r gwasanaeth iechyd I wneud siŵr trwy'n ysgolion a ballu bod y gwasanaethau yma ar gael ar draws y sir. Thank you for raising this important point, Helen, and for all your work in raising awareness about this important issue. In Gwynedd, we've been starting at our feet in a way with making sure that all the council staff, they're a lot in stressful roles. So we've got really good mental health support for over 6,000 staff that work for the council. We have, bite-sized little sessions with Andrew Canna, for example, talking about mental health, the importance of having a lunch break and regular breaks. So we offer a lot of support to our own staff. But I think, as you say, there's a wider role for us as counsellors within schools and the education system and beyond, really, in working with the health service to raise these issues.
Diolch, Nia. I think moving forward for all our counsellors, if you want to chip in and add anything else, so if you just use the raise your hand function, and then I'll come to you next as well. But no, thank you for that answer, Neil. Diolch yn fawr. We'll move on to the next question, Helen.
Yeah, given the growing struggles facing young people in a post-COVID lockdown world, how are counsellors like yourselves working with schools and youth services to promote good mental health?
Diolch. And Rhys, would you like to begin?
Yeah, diolch, Gwen. So part of the problem we've got is that youth services have, over the last 10 years, been chipped away at because they're not a statutory service. So I think the one thing that we should be doing as counsellors is making the case to make that a statutory service, so you protect that funding for youth work and youth outreach work. And one of the things that I did over the summer, there's a new youth outreach work project being started in my area, which is a first as in the 7 years I've been involved. We just went to speak to the young people who were taking part in that session in the basketball court in the park and asked them, what do you want from your community? And they thought, why on earth are you asking us that? He's like, well, you live here. I have a responsibility to represent you. And they were really surprised that nobody had yet come to ask them what they wanted from their local park, what they wanted from their, from their council. So we need to be making the case to protect those youth services and to involve young people in shaping their community, because if you have access to, a good local green space, if you have access to youth services, if you know where you can access safe playing facilities, then I think that generally helps young people to connect. So we know that, COVID's been difficult for all of us in not being able to connect with people, particularly so for children and young people who have that daily contact through school, and that's often their only contact with people their own age. So I think it's about giving young people, and obviously I think everybody here would agree with that, giving people agency over their community. And it's about, we have to go to young people and ask them, how they want things to look and work and feel. But for me, the priority has been making sure that our community services provide the opportunity for young people to connect and socialize and access opportunities and services where they need to. And in terms of your previous question, then providing opportunities to either prevent somebody's mental health from getting, to the point where they need medical support, or making sure that where a youth worker spots somebody who is in a difficult position, provides them with that, that pathway or that information to get the help they need as soon as they can, and to advocate for that young person. So yeah, it's a bit of a juggling act as a councillor, trying to bring all those things together, but there's plenty that we can be doing.
Thank you, Rhys. That's a great answer, thank you. Heledd, would you like to move on to your next question?
Yeah. Since I've been advocating the importance of keeping a healthy mental health through my social media channels, what I and many of the people who regularly respond to my content want to know is, in your opinion, what more can be done at a local level to make Wales a mentally healthy place to live?
Diolch. And I'll begin with you, Ross, Rhys and Ross. Ross, thank you.
Thanks, diolch, Heledd, for the question. That's absolutely key, isn't it? Given the collective trauma I think that we've all faced over the last 2 years, this is an opportunity to build back better. I know it's a phrase used by lots of national politicians, where we look at what we really value, which is time. We absolutely value time. We value our family and our friends, and we value our communities as well. But more importantly, we value our mental health and our well-being more than ever before. Mental health, just touching on some of Rhys's points, mental health has been for too long a taboo subject. I genuinely think there has been a shift change in that over the last 2 years, but even perhaps just before that, a genuine positive shift change. And it's often been the Cinderella service of the National Health Service. So lots of national politicians are now talking about a national health and mental health service combined, where the funding is split between the two. So local government, I think, has a role to play. Just going back to, because I think the schools element is really important to this. Many of us as councillors will be school governors as well, so we have direct access to the governance and the constructive challenge within and around our school systems. Where there is direct access to councillors via the education system, I think that can prove dividends to explore and reflect on what young people are thinking in their school life, but anything that they're bringing with them from home as well. And often school and counselling sessions within the school setting can be a really good place and a good time to reflect and to provide that ongoing support. And I think that's really, really important. So long gone, I hope, are the days where the Cinderella service is the mental health service of public services, and extra funding is put forward by national government, via the devolved structures, and via local government directly to young people who receive it on a daily basis. And I really hope that will prove dividends in the years to come.
Diolch, Ross, thank you. Does anyone else have anything to add? No, we'll move on to Heled's last question then.
With every sector facing different struggles due to the coronavirus pandemic, what measures can you, as councillors, help put in place to ensure mentally healthy workplaces?
Diolch. And Denisha, one for you.
So in in my role as cabinet member in Bridgend, I obviously look after, or it's not obvious, but I look after the workforce side of things as well. And I think it builds on what Nia was saying earlier. We recognise that mental health is important. We recognise that people are working from home and they need to take breaks. They need to take time away from the screen. They need to spend time with the family. That's, it's always tempting to just work on until the early hours of the morning because you're just at home. So I think for us, it's really important that we kind of encourage people to think about their mental health as well as their physical health. And it is something that we're doing in terms of well-being. We've got, like Nia said, that we've also got similar programs running through our systems in terms of we've got well-being sessions, we've got access to counselling sessions if staff want. So I think there is a whole bunch of work the local government is doing, and also recognising the fact that people have different needs and different views, and that's fine. And I think that's something that's changed in the last 5 or 6 years. So yeah, there's quite a bit going on.
Great, thank you. And Rhys, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so I think there's a danger that we think that what we're going through now is the new normal. So like the massive workloads people have, that we think that's acceptable moving forward because that's what we're now used to after 2 years. But one thing I think the public sector should be doing generally is going to a 4-day work week. If we can't do that in the public sector, where can we do it? And I think local government is probably a really good place to start. Done it in Cardiff with the waste collection teams. I think that's a really, really good thing to be looking at. So I think, terms and conditions and that flexibility, but let's try some big ideas like 4-day working week and give people back some time, as Ross was saying earlier.
And Ross?
Just very quickly, obviously, I support the 4-day working week. You've got my support on that. But I think it's time to have a national conversation about mental health. Prior to the pandemic, you had the hashtag it's okay not to be okay. That's part of the conversation that we need to be having nationally, not just among young people, but more broadly as well, that we can talk about mental health. And it's about raising awareness as often as we possibly can. I think Time to Change Day is just coming around the corner now on the 3rd of February. In workplaces, in youth clubs, in schools, we need to be talking about mental health. And it is absolutely okay to not be okay. But the support can be provided. People do need to reach out. They need to know that they can reach out, but not just reach out themselves. The services need to be there as well. So if the services are not matched to the need, that's where people fall between the gaps. And unfortunately, there can potentially be terrible circumstances and consequences.
Lovely, diolch.
Thank you, Ross. Diolch bawb. Heledd, I think that's everything. I hope they answered your questions.
Yes, thank you so much.
Great. Diolch. So Ian, would you mind taking Heledd out and bringing in Poppy if possible? Just want to say thank you to all the councillors for their time this evening. And we invited representatives from all parties that are currently standing at a local level, and unfortunately some Conservative councillors weren't available for the event this evening. But yeah, once again, thank you to you all for joining. And we've got Poppy. Hi Poppy. So Poppy will be Poppy Stowell-Evans will be asking the next lot of questions. So Poppy is from Newport, and she is the chair of YCA Wales, and she's also a climate activist. So Poppy, do you want to begin with your first question?
Yeah, thank you, Gwen. Hi, everyone. And as Helen said, thank you all so much for taking the time out to do this today. I think it's so important to raise awareness of what you guys do and all of the amazing work you do, especially before the local elections. So as Gwen mentioned, my name is Poppy and I'm 17, which means that when 16 and 17-year-olds were granted the vote in the last election, I had the amazing opportunity to vote for the first time, which was so cool, by the way. And something that I found really interesting was that there was a general excitement amongst my friends and that a lot of people were really eager to cast their ballot and to learn more about politics. So my first question is, in your opinion, why should young people engage with politics and how can they get involved?
Thank you, Poppy. I think, should we begin with Nia?
Diolch Poppy, a diolch am dy brwdfrydedd. Dwi'n meddwl y cwestiwn ydy pam ddim, pam fysa pobl ifanc ddim yn ymddiddori yn gwleidyddiaeth ac yn enwedig gwleidyddiaeth lleol. Mae gwasanaethau lleol mor agos i bobl ifanc. Dwi'n meddwl gwasanaethau ieuenctid oedd yn sôn am gynharach, ysgolion, beth sy'n digwydd yn y gymuned, pyllianofio, bob peth fel yna, ac yr holl argyfwng efo'r newid hinsawdd a falle. Felly, dwi'n gweld o'n od pam fysa pobl ddim yn ymddiddori i ddeud y gwir, ond dwi hefyd yn gwybod mae yna gyfrifoldeb a dwi'n falch o fod yma a falch o'r cyfle i ni ymestyn allan i bobl ifanc i egluro pam ddyliau nhw bod efo diddordeb. So thank you, Poppy. I think the question maybe is the other way around. Why wouldn't they be interested in politics and especially local politics? You know, the things that our local councils do are so close as some of the services that young people use the most. So, you know, we were talking about youth services, our schools, leisure centres, all those things. So, I can really see, and I'm so grateful for your enthusiasm for this topic. And I think also some of the big challenges that are facing us now, like climate change, the role of local councils is absolutely crucial. So, I think we also as councillors have got a responsibility to take part in things like this and, you know, be visible on our streets of our towns and stuff, and to reach out to young people, because I can see some young people are really disillusioned and fed up with politics. I think some bad examples maybe over the years by politicians. So I really value your enthusiasm, and I'm glad that we've got an opportunity tonight to reach out and to explain more about local government.
Diolch, Nia. Great, thank you, Nia, for that very in-depth answer and great answer as well. So Poppy, do you want to carry on with your next question?
Definitely, thank you. So I guess kind of, you know, what you said, Nia, about people like being involved in politics and wanting to be involved. I think over the last 4 years, we've seen so many young people gain political consciousness because of things like the climate crisis and because they want to have their voices heard that way. And, you know, as I'm sure you're aware, young people are generally quite aware of the challenges that our nation and the world faces in terms of the climate crisis and climate change. So I was wondering, from a local government perspective, what can be done to educate and inform the constituency as a whole about this issue to create a unified approach?
Thank you, Poppy. Diolch, Poppy. Rhys, would you like to take that answer?
Diolch, Poppy. I think there's lots that we can be doing. I think, you know, councils are huge organisations, have lots of property, you know, run, you know, buses, you got your collection vehicles, and I think it's not treating them as business decisions to be made internally about why we're making different decisions about how, as a council, we operate, and kind of having an open conversation about, okay, you know, we're spending X million on upgrading our bin collection vehicles because we know that the bin collection vehicle we've got contributes to pollution in our communities, and we've got, you know, collection vehicles idling in your street because they're collecting the buses, and that the bins, and that contributes to pollution in your community. And then also one of the things that Cardiff have done is a One Planet Cardiff strategy, and the idea behind the One Planet is that emphasising the fact that at the moment, if we take all the energy and the waste that Cardiff produces, we're actually using more energy than what we currently have available to us as a planet to sustain. And it's those sorts of, you know, bringing those sorts of creative concepts in so you can communicate to people and spark a discussion with people. And then it's also, I think, as local councillors, trying to equate people's concerns with everybody likes active travel infrastructure. At least they don't, not always in Cardiff, where it is just can be disruptive. And I think we do have a responsibility to, yes, represent those views, but actually to challenge people and say, well, we want to take cars off the road, not to make it difficult for you, but because air pollution contributes to hundreds of early deaths in Cardiff and thousands across Wales. And I think it's really trying to hit home and equipping councillors with that information and those skills to go and have those often difficult conversations with somebody when you are trying to get them to vote for you at the end of the day. So yeah, creative comms and kind of equipping us with that information to have those difficult conversations is really important.
Great, diolch Rhys, thank you Rhys. I think we will move on to your third question, Poppy.
Amazing, thank you, and thank you for that answer, Rhys. I think you're right. I think that communication is definitely key when it comes down to climate action, and key to making sure that everyone is kind of on board with the mission that will protect us all. And something that I think that's really cool that's happening in Wales at the moment is that Wales has aspired and has set the goal to become a zero waste nation by 2050. So I was wondering, how can local governments contribute to this effort?
Thank you, Poppy, and I'm going to take that to you, Ross.
Yeah, thanks so much for the question. Lots of the targets coming out from national government at the moment are hugely ambitious, but I think if we're not ambitious, then that says something about Wales. So certainly in terms of our environmental credentials, we want to be world leaders. Why do we want to be world leaders? Because we absolutely know that the climate crisis should have been tackled 10 years ago. Yesterday, not tomorrow. So we're sort of in the red zone at the moment. We really need to get our act together. What can local government do? Local government can do lots of things, already mentioned by Nia and Rhys, in terms of its fleet services. There are schemes ongoing in Bridgend at the moment around the areas in Bridgend at the moment where we are working to look at different ways and means where we can generate heat production. I also think there needs to be, we talked about mental health services earlier, about a national conversation. I think there needs to be a national conversation about energy consumption and production in Wales as well. The go-to tends to be, at the moment, wind energy. Wales is a land of quite a number of natural resources. I think we need to be tapping into as many of those as is possible. But that national conversation, which Rhys has mentioned, actually, it's a difficult one because we talk about needing to change people's behaviours. That is so difficult because if you have a particular behaviour, you're not possibly willing to change it very quickly, especially if the government is telling you to change it because you need to change it as a result of the climate crisis. So one thing that Rhys mentioned, which I think is relevant to this question as well, is the lack of joined up approach to public transport, moving people out of cars. And I'm pretty sure Nia is probably the best example here in Gwynedd. Public transport in Gwynedd, Nia, probably isn't in the best condition. Cardiff, Rhys, you probably have the best, but Bridgend, we're probably in between. Public transport is not connected. Rail, and buses and other forms of public transport. We need to invest hugely in that. Local government has a huge role to play through different various mechanisms of funding, but hopefully that can play a part as well.
Thank you, Ross. Diolch. Does anyone have any other comments on Poppy's question? No. Fab. We'll move on to the fourth then, Poppy.
Amazing, deal. So I guess, there's a big conversation about what we can do to mitigate the impact of climate change. But I think something that's important to note is that we're already seeing the impacts of climate change, and we're not just seeing those impacts across the world in a country perhaps we've never heard of before. We're seeing them at home in Wales. So I was wondering, what steps can local governments, actually take to adapt to and to reduce the impact of climate change on their constituents' lives and on the, how it impacts Wales moving forward?
Thank you. Denisha, would you like to begin?
Yeah, 100% agree with Poppy's view or explanation that I think climate change is real, and I think there are still people out there that deny it. I know in my own ward we've suffered from flooding, that we're in a valley, and I remember growing up my dad used to be like, oh, if Ogmore gets flooded, then that's the end of the world really. And I know we had some flooding and I was thinking, oh, the end is near, but yeah, in all seriousness, I do think we are seeing the impact of climate change here, and unfortunately we're now having to be reactive as well as proactive. So we are putting in measures to counteract the stuff that we see right now. So, you know, we're having to put in flood prevention work and flooding infrastructure in like our coastal town of Porthcawl, and then we're having to do culvert clearances more and more regularly in our valleys communities, just because of the way it is. I think what we are doing, like we are in Bridgend, and I know across Wales every local authority is being proactive in the way it can. So I know Ross has mentioned, I'm just going to call you Scott then. Ross has mentioned that we've got Bridgend 2030 strategy, and we're not just having a blanket strategy for the entire county. We're looking at what resources and what suits each area of the county. So I know that there's heat networks, so we're being innovative, and we're actually not just thinking about what we produce, but where it comes from. So you know, in Bridgend Town Centre, we're looking at using the heat that comes off a swimming pool to power local homes. So we're not just thinking about car journeys and that sort of thing, but we're actually looking at the wider picture and thinking, okay, so sometimes we are going to need to live our lives. What can we do to help the environment at the same time? You know, I think Ross, and I think it's been mentioned multiple times already about bins, and I think we had a lot of pain about 4 or 5 years ago when we changed our recycling, and that was environmental decision, and it was painful. As an authority, you know, I think the leader Carwyn Jones was the First Minister at the time, and I know the leader was at a meeting and it got commented that Carwyn was late because he was waiting for his bins to be picked up. And I think like it is funny, but it's also, looking back, it's funny. I think at the time it's really painful, and I think people don't like change, and sometimes as politicians we have to make the right decisions with the idea that it's going to be beneficial in the future and for the future. And I think, like Rhys mentioned, active travel networks, yeah, it is difficult right now, especially when you're used to, you know, your 20-minute car journey being 20 minutes, and then when it's 40 minutes you kind of get a little bit fed up, but we know it's going to be beneficial for the future, and so I think we just have to take the pain now.
Thank you. And I'll take that to you, Rhys, then.
Yeah, just quickly, I think one of the biggest problems I think we have is that if I say, well, I will not we, because I'm a single councillor. I think generally how politics and government works is that we dictate to people, and I think until we really involve people in what change looks like, and you know, Ross talking about the behaviour change stuff, unless you ask people, you know, really involve people in how that, you know, how is the system going to work? How does this change affect you? How do you think we could be doing this? What's your ambition for this? I think we're going to struggle to change those behaviours. So, you know, things like citizens' assemblies, you know, things like citizens' panels will really make sure that you bring people with you when you design big change. Otherwise, you will have that backlash. You will design flaws in systems. And actually, I don't think we always quite meet the ambition of ordinary people when they designed in systems and change are designed in back rooms. So I think that's a challenge for all of us in changing politics more widely.
Diolch. Thank you. Diolch. So I think you've got one more question, Poppy.
I do indeed, thank you. It's been really interesting hearing how, you know, in local government you guys are looking at taking a reactive and proactive unified approach on climate action. I think that's really cool. And something else that I find really cool about local government is how the choices and the work you guys do impacts our lives on so many different levels. So I was thinking, you know, with the broad spectrum of responsibilities and things you guys have to think about, what do you think are the most important issues that need tackling at the moment, especially for young people? Thank you.
Diolch. And I'm going to take that to you, Nia.
Wel, dwi'n meddwl yr union pwnc yma, ynde? Dwi'n meddwl newid hinsawdd, jyst i wneud o yn andros o lleol. Dwi'n byw yn Porthmadog. Mae Porthmadog yn dre gafodd ei greu trwy adeiladu cob mawr ac cael ei adennill gan y môr. Felly, da ni'n ofnadwy o ymwybodol fama fel mae lefelau'r môr yn codi. Bydd Porthmadog yn diflannu, so mae o really yn dod â'r neges adra i ni yma yn fy nhref bach i. Felly, dwi'n meddwl, uwchben bopeth, really, dyma ydy y sialans fwyaf sy'n gwynebu hunaniaeth i gyd a draws y byd, a mae rhaid i ni gymryd o ddifri. Mae rhaid i ni wneud penderfyniadau bob dydd am treth cyngor, ysgolion a bob peth, ond mae rhaid i ni newid yn mindset fel bod newid hinsawdd yn ganolog i bob un o'r penderfyniadau bach yna. Yeah, I think, Poppy, this is the challenge of our time. Climate change is the biggest challenge facing humanity. So just to make it really local, I represent the ward of Porthmadog. Porthmadog is a town that was reclaimed from the sea. There was no Porthmadog about 200 years ago until William Alexander Maddox built the cob. So we feel it really here on a local level. Once the sea rises, there'll be no Porthmadog. So it really makes it, brings it home to us. But no, I think we've got to change our mindset. And I think every decision we make in local governments, be it about seagulls, bins, education, we've got to have the mindset of thinking about climate. Because, like I said, this is the most fundamental challenge of our time.
Diolch. Great, thank you. And you, Ross?
Yeah, just really quickly, thanks Poppy for that question. Quick win, let's reinvest back in our youth services. I think that's a real biggie because those youth services have been absolutely decimated by austerity over the last 10 or 15 years. Perhaps one of the biggest points is anxiety and nervousness around job opportunities. We really need to work with partners to ensure that young people have the best job opportunities that they can have, whether that's going to university and leaving with a degree and having a professional blue-collar job, for want of a better word, or whether that's investment in vocational avenues as well. I think that's really, really important. I live in a Valleys community. If you wanted a blue-collar job, you probably have to travel to Bridgend, Cardiff or Swansea. That leads to what in effect is a brain drain, and that has huge knock-on impacts on the local economy as well. So it's about maintaining job opportunities closer to home, and again investing in public transport so that young people can get to and from work and not have to drive a car into city centres or town centres. Again, part of the climate change scenario as well. But yeah, absolutely, investment in job opportunities I think is probably causing quite a degree of anxiety among young people.
Thank you, Ross. Diolch. Poppy, I hope they all answered your questions. There's a lot of thought-provoking topics there. So thank you. Thanks for asking them questions tonight.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Great. Ian, would you like to bring Ian in instead? I know just echoing what you said then, Ross, about job opportunity. I know Ian's quite keen to find out some more on what local councils are doing about that. So it naturally brings us into that conversation a bit more. Hi, Ian.
Hello.
So to everyone else, I'd just like to introduce Ian Kirk. So Ian is from Cwmbran, and he is a well-known face on TikTok who's passionate about climate change, race equality and employment opportunities. So Ian, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to say thank you all for having me here. It's been a great pleasure to listen to everyone's questions, and it's been super interesting. So for me, like Gwen said, it actually perfectly segues in. I wanted to know how you think that local councils can ensure that there are enough training and employment opportunities for young people in their constituency, especially because with everything at the moment, I think, like you said, Ross, there's a lot of anxiety around those sort of areas.
Diolch Ian, thank you. I'm going to go to you, Rhys, first.
Thank you, Ian. And it's a really important topic, and I think it's one that I think most people don't think local councils have a lot of sway over. But actually, all councils will be responsible for big building projects. You know, as I think it was Denisha mentioned, you know, the heat network. So there's, you know, there are new jobs and new skills needed that way. Massive workforce as well. And what we need to be doing, I think, is using the massive procurement power. So where the local authority says, yes, you can build that new, I don't know, let's call it school, that you make sure that contractor has built in, you know, provisions for employment and training opportunities, apprenticeships, that they're well paid, that it gives people the skills they need to go forward to other jobs. But also then councils have a massive responsibility around economic development. So trying to bring investment into an area and develop, you know, improve incomes and improve people's standards of living. So making sure that when we have those conversations about, well, you know, Ross talked about the big developers and or the corporates, I think you called them, Ross. You know, is that what we want for our towns and our cities and our communities? Is some big conglomerate from somewhere else in the world to come in and do things from elsewhere? Or actually, do we want an organization, perhaps a small business or a medium-sized business, to come in and help them grow and make sure that they are supported to bring on young people? So I think, you know, the spending power of councils has to be geared towards creating jobs for people and making sure that as part of that, you know, there are opportunities there for young people to start and continue and grow in those jobs and those industries.
Great, thank you, Rhys. Diolch. Yeah, would you like to move on to your next question?
Yeah, perfect. So obviously, like you said, Rhys, most of the time young people don't necessarily know that the council has that kind of role or that kind of power. So what do you guys think can be done to encourage more young people to get more politically engaged, and particularly in regard to the local elections?
Diolch, thank you. And I'm going to take that to Denisha.
Sorry, my hand up there. Yeah, so I think first of all, I think through education is, you know, the councils run the schools, and therefore I think that's a really good way to help young people, especially at the lower end, understand what politics is and why it's important. I know that we've got the curriculum for Wales, and each school now decides what they think that they should be teaching their young people at their schools, and I think it should be collaborative as well. So I think young people should make the case to their teachers that they want to, or, you know, to their teachers or their kind of school councils, to say that this is what we want to learn about. In the local authority, we have a youth council, and I think most local authorities have youth councils, and they're really driving forward the agenda in terms of political education for young people, and I think they're doing a fantastic job. So I think working as a local authority and having a youth council is something that local governments is really good at, and I think they should be doing more of it. And I think it's not just formal settings. I think it's kind of asking, kind of making young people aware of the fact that they can vote, because I think a lot of young people probably have missed that comms, because comms isn't something that local government does very well, and so I think that it's probably something that, you know, needs to be mentioned several times over, that, you know, you've now got the right to vote and please go and vote, because I think for me, you know, it was really good that one of our speakers came on, or one of you came on and said that they'd voted already, and I just thought, oh, do you know, I remember going to vote for the first time, and I remember being equally excited, but not everyone is, and I think I think we have a role to play to actually get people to vote and get those habits in, because I think once people stop voting, they don't tend to vote again. So I think it's trying to embed those, like what I see as positive behaviours at an early age. And I think that is something, we can all help with. I think there's lots that local government can do.
Diolch, Tanisha. Thank you. To follow us.
Yeah, just really quickly, just to agree with Tanisha, voting is a rite of passage. It's something that should be cherished when you consider the fight that took place to get especially women to vote all those years ago. So it is a rite of passage. I also think it's my fundamental belief that politicians should inspire people to vote for them. It's not about you reaching out to us, and it's all very comfortable us perhaps relying on older people to vote, because when you look at the statistics between the demographics of people who vote, if you're 50 plus, you're certainly 70 plus, you're almost guaranteed to vote. Whereas if you look at the stats for last May, in terms of the new cohort, 16 and 70-year-olds, it was very low. So it's absolutely our job as politicians to inspire you to vote. The engagement needs to be two-way, but initially we need to be reaching out to you. It's not you coming to us. I don't think that's the right thing. You are a need to reach group, not a hard to reach group. And if we are going into schools, like Tanisha said, and speaking with you about the issues that matter to you, it may be entirely different from the rest of the constituency and other issues that we're having in our inbox, but we need to be at the table speaking with you about the issues that matter to you and trying to resolve them as best we can. We might not have all the answers. You might have the answers, which is great. But it's just making sure that we inspire you to vote as much as we possibly can. It's not your vote. It's not your job to come to us. It's our job to come to you.
Diolch, Ross. Thank you. Yeah, and would you like to move on to the next question?
Yes, thank you. And thank you both for those answers. Obviously, for me, I luckily, it is luckily, turned 18 when the general election came up. And obviously, part of the driving force behind how I voted was major issues like climate change and racial inequality. And I think often it can be a struggle to see how those issues can be seen on a local level, because often I think we talk about it on a nationwide level. So I was wondering how you think that local councils can play their part in tackling these kind of big issues.
Diolch. I'm going to go to you first, Ross.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think this is an ideal point at which I can say I am pleased and proud to live in Wales. And not making too much of a political point, but I think the national conversation here across political parties, the political spectrum, is very different from perhaps elsewhere in the United Kingdom. So I am pleased that we're having a very different, grown-up and engaging conversation on all of these big issues of the day. Race equality is huge in Wales. The aftermath of the COVID-19 crisis, Black Lives Matter, the horrific and tragic murder of George Floyd has really set aside huge, I think a huge swell of support in terms of race equality in Wales. And I really think we're making really good efforts. But what can local government do around race equality? Absolutely, it does have a role to play, because we have a workforce. We need to make sure that our workforce is representative of the people and the communities that we serve. If people don't see others who look and think like them, they're not going to engage with services. That's absolutely key. So yeah, we absolutely have a role to play in race equality. And in climate change, just going back to some of the things that we mentioned in the Poppy, active travel, community heat networks, the use of natural resources in Wales. So local government, I live in a valley, we've got a river. I would absolutely love to lever funding via the local authority to have a hydro project that has community ownership. I think if we are able to and I don't want to use the word sell because it's wrong, but if we're able to encourage people to look at energy consumption in a different way, clean energy, but that they can have ownership in, and it then benefits the local economy and the local community, I think we're quids in. But Rhys has mentioned it's beginning those conversations. What motivates them to change their behaviour? Let's understand that first. But it's the beginning of those conversations that are going to be difficult. Building relationships takes time. Takes time, takes effort, takes energy. It proves dividends if you get that right, even if it takes 5 or 10 years.
Diolch, Ross. please.
Yeah, just to give an example, I suppose, in terms of where you can materially have an impact on somebody's life. So there was some housing and homelessness statistics published recently by Cardiff Council, and it turns out that I might not get this entirely correct, but the ratios will be right. That the Asian population in Cardiff is around 8%, but the number of people presenting for housing and homeless support from the defined as Asian was 11%, and the ratio was similarly but even bigger for those from the defined as Black. So, you know, how are we, in terms of providing housing and homelessness services, then how are you involving people to make sure that they're designed in a way that reaches those communities, so people have access to information in either a language that meets their need, or, you know, that services are available in those local communities. And as Ross said, making sure that people see themselves represented when they go to, you know, housing options to ask for homelessness support. You have a choice as to who you might speak to that might understand your circumstances a bit differently. But you know, social services, schools, economy, there are so many different services that councils provide where we can have that real tangible difference in somebody's life, because they may be in that position seeking support because of who they are, for no other reason other than, you know, society unfortunately is as it is. So just to provide a, you know, a tangible example of where we can make a difference.
Yeah, definitely. Great answer. Thank you. I think we'll have time for perhaps one more question. So would you like to ask your last question to the panel?
Yes, thank you. So actually, it very much relates to the issues we've just talked about here. So I was wondering, obviously, what would you say to a young person in particular who feels that they're not currently represented or heard by their local council?
Diolch. A na fynd i chi Nia yn gyntaf. I'll go to Nia first.
Ie, gret, diolch. Ac jyst i adeiladu ar y pwynt blaenorol, really, dwi'n meddwl, dwi'n teimlo'n gryf iawn amdan ni yn Wynedd, bod gyda ni rôl pwysig i chwarae yn sgwrs amdan Black Lives Matter ac amdan hiliaeth ac yn y blaen. Dwi'n meddwl eich mae pobl yn meddwl, mae Gwynedd i fyny fanna, does na ddim problem fel sy'n yna dinasoedd Caerdydd, Pen y Bont, ond mae llawn mor bwysig i ni yma yn Wynedd, bod cyfleoedd cyfartal i bobl o wahanol hiliau, bobl o gwahanol rhywoldeb, achos so fo medru bod yn lle unig iawn, dwi'n meddwl, mewn lle mor gwledig am bod na llai o'r poblogaeth, felly dwi'n falch bod chdi wedi codi'r pwynt yna. Yeah, just to build on the earlier point really about what you were saying about racism and stuff, I'm really keen to bring these issues up, and here in Gwynedd, I think sometimes we concentrate on the cities like Cardiff and Bridgend, but I'm really passionate that Gwynedd is involved in those conversations as well. Sometimes people might imagine, oh, there's not many people from ethnic minorities in Gwynedd, so, you know, don't worry about it. But I think the issues are as important for us here as they are in other parts of Wales, and it could be quite lonely, I think, if you are from an ethnic minority, you haven't got your community around you, other people, you know, to turn to. And I think it's the same with issues to do with sexuality and stuff like that. So yeah, no, to answer specifically your question about getting more young people involved, I think it's, as Ross said, it's up to us to reach out and start those conversations. Often I talk to young people, they're like, oh, I'm not interested in politics, you know, I'm not interested in the council. But it doesn't take like 2 minutes, you start scratching the surface and you're like, oh, right, okay, so climate change, you're not interested in it. Oh, yeah, I'm interested in climate change. Oh, right, okay, all the stuff that you're talking about, yeah, and, you know, jobs, you know, the services in your area. So it just takes time, I think, to engage with people and to reach out. And yeah, it's definitely our responsibility to do that, because everyone really does care about these things, and it's just a matter of reaching out to them as well.
Diolch, Nia. And Ross, would you like to follow on from that?
Yeah, just really quickly, an indirect answer to your question, Ian. My answer would be change it by standing. Stand for election if you are able to. If you're old enough, stand for election, and if not, prepare to stand. By preparing to stand, I mean campaigning in your local community on what matters to you. Get in the inbox of your local councillor, get in the Facebook messages icons and the chat function of your local councillor. Attend meetings, get involved, have your say. It goes without saying that the diversity of council chambers across Wales isn't there. It does not represent the Wales to 2022. In Bridgend, I think we have quite a few younger councillors. I think Denisha would agree, probably more than your average, but I think your average councillor is probably touching on the late 50s, if not early 60s across Wales. Surveys will tell you, stats will tell you, research will tell you that the more diverse a decision-making process is, the better the decision that's made. And if we are not representative of the communities that or if we don't reflect the communities that we represent, then we are ultimately going to make poor decisions on behalf of minoritized communities in particular.
Diolch, Ross. Thank you. Great. There's some really good questions and answers there, and thank you, Ian, as well, for your contribution. I think we can bring Amber in now, Ian, for our last round of questions. Great. So I'd just like to introduce you once again to Amber Davies. So Amber is from Mid Wales, and she is a disability rights campaigner. So welcome, Amber.
Hi, Gwen. Diolch.
No problem. So Amber, would you like to begin with asking your first question to the councillors?
Yeah, of course. So as Gwen mentioned, among thousands of other young people in Wales, I live with disability. One that is actually invisible, so that can prove quite challenging sometimes, and I guess bring along quite a bit of discrimination, misunderstanding, stigma, all those sort of things from all members of the community, really. So my first question is, what powers do local government have to make positive change for people like myself?
Diolch, Amber, thank you. I'm going to take that to Rhys first.
Diolch, Amber. I think as most of us have, we've all said so far, the volume, the breadth of services and the breadth of people and organisations that the council's works with is enormous. You know, voluntary organisations, community groups, schools, hospitals, all that. You know, there's an organisation in your community. The likelihood is that the council is in some way working with them to deliver services, either on their behalf or with them. And it's about making sure that, you know, one of the things that every council report will have is an equalities impact assessment, which I can't always say they really get to the grips with what the decisions that we're making as councils actually mean for people on the ground. So one of the things that was raised with us during the early lockdown was around giving over road space to cyclists, which, you know, vast majority of people support, in widening pavements to give people safer space during lockdown to social distance. But it turns out that one of the projects in Cardiff didn't speak to the site group. So you had a situation where a whole street had been redesigned without speaking to people with visual impairments. And I think that's where, you know, coming back to that real tangible difference that we can make to people's lives, if we're not involving people who are, you know, day-to-day living with a disability of any sort, visible or not, then you're not going to design services, you're not going to design your communities, you know, your pavements, your bus stops, your parks in a way that works with people. And it's that lack of representation, I think, as Ross was talking about, and that lack of involvement that means that I think too often we do fall short as councils of providing for everyone in the community, and in not being good enough. It's the best it can be. But yeah, that breadth of contact with organisations and communities and people, and that real power to require people to do things differently that works with people, is the real power behind local government when it comes to disability rights.
Diolch, Rhys. That's a very detailed answer, so thank you for that. Amber, would you like to ask your next question?
Yeah, of course, I agree. It's great to get everyone involved where possible, for the best outcomes. And as Ieuan touched on with his questions, with work and diversity, I was just wondering, because fairly recently I started my first graduate job, and that's something that can be quite difficult and daunting for a lot of young people, no matter what scenario they're in. But I was just wondering what help local governments can have in terms of helping young people, and particularly with disabilities, into employment.
Great, thank you. So Denisha, would you like to begin?
Yeah. So I think in terms of job opportunities, I think that disabled people and people with disabilities do have a more difficult time of finding a job, especially with kind of hidden disabilities, because I think that people often forget hidden disabilities, and I have dyslexia, and I struggle with public reading, and every month they make me read an announcement, and when you go to press conferences and not press conferences but photo shoots, and you do opening ceremonies, you have to read a script, and I always struggle with it. But I think what I've personally done is I've made a point of saying, actually, do you know what, I have dyslexia, and this is me challenging myself and pushing my boundaries, and I think I've not let it be hidden anymore, and I think that's quite powerful, but it's not for everybody, and I think local councils can help with, again, it goes back to education and workplace education as well, because I think with hidden disabilities, not everyone's aware of all of the hidden disabilities that exist, and I think to have training for staff and to encourage people to learn about what potential disabilities your colleague could have, and then also encouraging people to be kind and compassionate in the workplace, because I think sometimes people make decisions a lot quicker than others, and some people need a lot more information than others to make a decision, and I think they're both fine. And I think trying to encourage that sort of compassionate workplace is something that local government can do, and obviously encouraging people to learn about it through education or adult learning. And I think adult learning is also important. I think in terms of employment, I think we do have work to do. I think, sorry if that's a pun, but we do have work to do around helping disabled people and people with disabilities into work, and I think actually we probably should focus on that and probably put together a sort of pathway that is focused on that particular area, because I don't think in Bridgend we do that, and I will take that back and have a look at that, because I know we look at people from different backgrounds, we look at encouraging diversity, we look at encouraging diversity in terms of race, in terms of sexuality, in terms of gender. We do try to produce jobs that are accessible for all backgrounds, but I don't know if we've done that enough, so I will take that back. I think there's lots to do, but we are trying and we are mindful. I hope that answers it.
Thank you, Denisha. Nia, hoffech chi ychwanegu unrhyw beth?
Just i ategu union be mae Rhys a Danisha di deud, mae eisiau newid yr diwylliant rili, a gai jyst diolch i Amber achos mae hi yn rôl fodel yn y maes yma i bobl eraill, ac mae hynna'n hynod o beth da. Ond fyswn i jyst yn licio pwysleisio, ti'n gwybod, o dan yr Equality Act, mae gan pobl anabl, pobl o hil gwahanol, pobl o crefydd, mae gennych chi y protection o dan y gyfraith. Dych chi'n mynd jyst gofyn am help, please gai help. Mae y ddeddf yma i amddiffyn chi a neud siŵr bod chi'n cael bob cyfle, a mae hynna wedi sgwennu i fewn i'r gyfraith efo Llywodraeth Leol, felly swn i jyst yn licio pwysleisio'r pwynt yna. I just wanted to totally agree with Danisha and Rhys, because I think we need to have change in our culture and the way we approach disabled people. And I think, Amber, you are an amazing role model for this, and really driving that forward. But I just wanted to remind everyone, under the Equality Act, especially for local government, it's not like a nice to do and will help disabled people. It's actually the law not to discriminate and to do the impact assessments and to make sure that we can consider, sex, race, disability, all the different characteristics. So I think that's important to stress. It's not like a little favor, can I have help to do my job? It's your right. And it's for us in local government to deliver that. I think it's important.
Great. Diolch, Nia. Diolch, Nia. But I think we've got time for one more question. If you'd like to give us your last question.
Yeah, no problem. Diolch pawb. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate your answers and kind of, I guess, giving thought to the topic. So my last question is that the disease that I currently live with, or the invisible illness, is currently incurable. So I was just wondering, what, on a wider scale, I guess, what powers do local government have in terms of influencing research, treatments, funding, anything in that area?
The question. I'm going to take that to you, Ross, first.
Sorry, you went into Dalek mode then, Gwen. Sorry. Can I just concur with Nia's sentiments? Really, I think the work that you're doing on hidden disabilities, Amber, is absolutely fantastic. I took a quick peek at your Instagram, and you are really lifting the lid, so to speak, on hidden disabilities. So congratulations on that. I think you really deserve recognition. To answer this question, and perhaps the wider questions, what is local government doing? What can local government do? Let's be honest with each other. Probably local government isn't doing enough, and we need to do more to better understand the issues specifically for disabled people, whether that's a hidden disability or not. I think in too many cases, politicians, policy wonks, perhaps service delivery partners make assumptions. That is probably, it's absolutely the wrong thing to do. And that's why we need to reach out to people as individuals and see them as individuals. I'd like to think that the medical model of disability is consigned to the dustbin of history. It's 2022, and we absolutely should focus on the social model of disability. Perhaps in too many cases, not going to mention any in particular, but the medical model of disability still exists in this country. And I think we need to raise awareness that it is 2022, things have moved on, and it's absolutely society that is the barrier to people's full involvement in society. There are systemic barriers in place. It is not the fault of disabled people that they are unable to partake in any form of activity or society as a whole. It is the fault of society itself and the barriers that we put in place. So I think there is a job of work to be done by local government to lever funding from possibly the National Health Service into local government services to better understand the position of disabled people and to reach out and have those individual conversations with people and never, ever to assume.
Diolch, Ross. Thank you. It was a great answer. Fab. And I think that's all we have time for, Amber. So thank you so much for your questions and your contribution to the session. Yeah, and I think it might be a nice idea before we wrap up to bring all the influencers back into the room. I hope I've not gone Dalek again. Fab. Yeah, so just before we end the session, I think it'd be just good to have one more, I'm going to give you one more question then to all you councillors on the panel. And I'll begin with you, Nia. So, and you can all answer the same question as well. So in one sentence only, why do you think young people should care about local government?
Well, I think local government should care about young people, and that will then make young people pay more interest and care about local government. So I think we should, putting them at the top of the agenda.
Diolch. Rhys, would you like to follow?
Yeah, I think basically local government, as most of politics, doesn't work for young people. And isn't working and preparing us for the future. So unless we change the conversation by getting young people elected and getting people involved, we won't build the future that we all need, and people will continue to be ignored and let down by politics.
Diolch. Denisha?
I think local government touches the lives of young people as much as it touches the lives of anybody else, and I think it's your duty to get involved.
Thank you. And lastly, Ross?
Yeah, I would agree with Rhys in particular, and I would add that, as I mentioned previously, local government is the level of government closest to home. It's your best bet and probably your easiest bet to help shape not just the services in your community, but how your community looks in the future as well.
Some great answers there. Thank you. Thanks a lot. A diolch I chi unwaith eto am gymryd rhan yn y sesiwn heno. Dwi'n mond ddiolchgar am eich holl cwestiynau a cyfraniadau. So thank you all for taking part in the session this evening, and we're really grateful for all your questions and contributions. A fel y soniais yn gynharach, mae etholiadau Hymru yn cael eu cynnal ar y 5 o Fai, ac eleni mae hwn yn gyfle i unrhyw un ar 15 neu'n hyn gael dweud ar y materion sy'n bwysicaf iddyn nhw, a gallech chi gyfrestru i bleidleisio tan 4 ar 10 o Ebrill, a dim ond tua 5 munud y bydd yn gymryd i wneud hynny. Felly i ddarganfod mwy am yr ymgyrch a sut gallwch chi gyfrestru bleidleisio, ewch i wefan yr ymgyrch trwy Chwilio Cymru Dweud y Ddweud. Ac os oes gan unrhyw un arall sy'n gwylio digwyddiad ar sesiwn heno yma, unrhyw gwestiynau pellach, yna cyflwynwch nhw yn y sylwadau ar YouTube, ac fe wnawn ni'n ein gorau i'w hateb. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, the local elections are taking place on May the 5th this year, and this is a chance for anyone aged 16 or over in Wales to have a say on the issues that matter most to them. So, to the wider audience, you can register to vote until the 14th of April, and it'll only take around 5 minutes to do so. So to find some more out about the campaign and how you can register to vote, you can visit the campaign website through searching Wales Use Your Views. And if anyone watching this event has any further questions, then please submit them in the comments and we will do our best to answer them. And we welcome questions in both English and Welsh. So diolch yn fawr unwaith eto chi gyd. Thank you very much for attending the session. Hwyl fawr.